and welcome. My name is Silvia Pavoni, economics editor of The Bank. I'm joined by the magazine's editor, Brian Caplen. Now, Brian, whether you're a retail or corporate clients, chances are that these days your bank does not make it in your list of favorite brands, at least in the developed world. And banks are becoming more and more aware of the importance of branding. So we try to put together values to be associated to the brands of many of the banks around the world, and we ranked no less than 500 names. This was done on the back of research conducted by consultancy firm Brand Finance. Now, who came on top and why?
Yeah, as you say, the whole issue for banks in terms of branding has become much more prominent over the last few years, and I think that was probably because of the financial crisis. So I think the banks realize that they need to start thinking of themselves in the same sorts of ways that some of the big consumer brands think of themselves, like Apple and Amazon. And we've done this top 500 banking brands ranking now, going back to 2006, and always attracts a lot of interest in the magazine. This year, Wells Fargo, the American bank, has come top. HSBC, that was top last year, has slipped back to third place, and actually that development reflects a trend of American banks have done very well this year. UK banks have fallen backwards a bit. I think that's partly due to the sort of regulatory problems that some of them have had. And it's not a clear division between developed market banks and emerging market banks. So in past years, we've seen massive growth in the brand value for emerging market banks, particularly the Chinese banks. And some falling away of some of the big American brand names. Now it's a bit more of a mixed picture, and you're seeing some Chinese names go forward, some go back, some Brazilian names go forward, some go back, some American names go forward, some go back. Europeans are kind of more or less in the middle.
Okay, so were we able to depict some kind of trying to justify why some of these banks were doing better, some were not performing as well?
Yeah, I think the strong performance of the American banks is due to the speed at which they've restructured themselves in the States, and the fact that they've kind of reorganized their balance sheets, got rid of a lot of the bad assets, and the American economy is beginning to look better. So it's a brighter picture, and one of the key elements to this is projected future earnings. So their projected future earnings looks quite good. I think in the case of some of the emerging market banks, I think that they probably got a little bit ahead of themselves in terms of earnings potential. I think there's more of a sort of realistic picture out there. So perhaps in some cases, in the Chinese and Brazilian cases, you're seeing a bit of a move backwards. In the case of the UK banks, as we talked about, I mean, they ran into regulatory problems, Standard Chartered and HSBC, so that affected them. And the European banks are somewhere in the middle. Clearly, they have got the Eurozone crisis to contend with, and the outlook for growth in Europe is very poor.
And is there any specific bank that caught your eye?
Well, I mean, you've seen some really big moves in amongst some banks. So like when we look at the fastest movers or the biggest increases in brand value, Agricultural Bank of China is out there. It increased by some $6 billion of value, which is like 3 times as much as anybody increased in the previous ranking. And I think Agricultural Bank of China was the sort of latecomer of the big 4 state-owned Chinese banks to kind of modernize and start to improve not just only its systems and its kind of operations, but also its marketing and its brand value. So I think a bank like that has benefited very well. The same thing is interesting is if you start to look at some of the big European brand names like Santander and BNP Paribas, one of the interesting things you find is that their brand value stays reasonably consistent over the years. But what changes is the market's perception to some extent. So if you actually measure brand value in relation to market cap, you get a very high number with those banks, which suggests that the market's actually undervaluing the intrinsic value of their brand. By contrast with some of the Chinese banks, you get quite a low percentage of brand value to market cap, which suggests that the market's actually putting a higher number on some of those brand values than actually is borne out by the earnings potential.
Yeah, so there's quite some interesting analysis to monitor and see how this situation develops. And obviously we received a lot of interest in this ranking, and I know that you have been busy talking during public events about the ranking. What kind of reception did you get during these talks?
Yeah, I mean, along with the ranking, which comes out in February, and we're also going to do a sort of second version of it in March, where we look at the whole range from 2006 to the present day in terms of what's happened with the banks. But we also do a series of events. This year we've done one in London. We've got ones to do in Istanbul, Hong Kong and New York later in the year. And we basically get senior marketing people to come in and both talk and listen about the kind of concepts around brand value. And what we've done this year is this is like a half-day conference. It has a big slant on leadership, because clearly you can't do anything too much with your brand and your marketing unless you've got the buy-in of the very senior people at the top.
Sure.
So this time we've been discussing about, what is it that a leader needs to see in the brand value in order to kind of adopt the most modern marketing techniques.
So a very interesting topic to be discussed and to take on the road. Thank you for your comments, Brian.